Hi, welcome back to the Digbee mini-series. Today we're going to focus in on how a responsible mining company can stand out and build value internally and externally. It's quite an important part of the extension of what we did earlier this year and really culminates into how we can communicate better. But before I go into that, I just want to ask you to keep in touch and see what's going on. We've got plans for the next few months. We're going to have a few industry leaders, which I think are quite exciting. We'll announce quite soon, coming on for a discussion. But also we're going to try and identify a few younger people in the industry to have an interview with and try and get their recognition of some of the changes and the new trends coming in from how younger people are seeing mining. So here's a quick analogy that I just wanted to kind of talk about. So imagine we're going into the Beaver Creek tent to present to a number of different fund managers. It's a crowded room. They're all pitching to the same investor. And each company has roughly the same story. It's a fantastic asset, great intersections, amazing grades, good infrastructure. We've got a board second to none, etc. And everyone's voice really over these presentations largely blends into the noise. But then one company stands up and almost turns on a light. They take a slightly different approach. They talk about the upsides and everything, but they speak really clearly with regards to the roadmap. They understand where the risks are between being a developer, maybe at preliminary PEA level, scoping study level, but they've clearly mapped out all the different areas of risk in order to get into production. How can we reduce the permitting time? How can we engage with our local community, get them on board earlier? How can we engage with the regulators to ensure that the permitting times align with the community's expectations? And how that company, therefore, is going to build trust over time with their different stakeholders. And suddenly this person, having spoken so clearly and given a different pitch than most of the others, everyone starts to listen. And the investors suddenly stop scrolling on their phones and they begin to consider what this person is really saying in a way that has not been done before. And that's what responsible communication does. It turns on a light. It sets you apart from the crowd. It makes your pitch clearer, louder, more credible. And in today's capital markets, where we are seeing new money coming back in, but it is critically important if we're going to reach out and get a better shareholder structure with a lower cost of capital, the difference in the way we pitch this is critically important. So think of your communication as a beacon in a foggy day, in a foggy market where everybody's noise is just reverberating. Communication is not in itself on its own. It's a strategic asset with which different stakeholders will interpret that message to some degree in a different way. Investors, communities, and regulators all have their own different angles. And we need to know who are we talking to so that we can portray our message very clearly. Most of these investors are no longer convinced about the technical data alone. And I know these $5 million fundraisings and private placements, we're still talking to the same people that we were 20 or 30 years ago. And no, they probably don't really require the responsibility and the sustainability stuff. But think longer term than that. Think of how we're going to communicate out to different types of longer term investors who we want to have as our shareholders and our partners. How do we make sure we get the offtake agreement that we want, which is 10 years rather than 1 year? Clear, responsible communication guides stakeholders towards trust, towards investment and longer term support. Now, I think it's probably fair to say that the industry hasn't evolved its communication in decades. And that's bizarre because stakeholder expectations have so fundamentally changed. Investors, which I'll come to in a second, have many different requirements. They're also aware of the problems of the industry of the last 10 to 20 years. They know where the risks lie. But now we've got also communities and regulators who are connected and who have different expectations than the past. We need to understand, listen and understand what their requirements are before we try and portray a message. Most investors no longer require just technical data as a means to support investment. They're looking for a full de-risked strategy with which management teams, skilled management teams, can effectively deploy and therefore allow the sector to get over the poor execution of development. What strikes me, which hasn't changed in the last few years, there's been some marginal changes, is that virtually every deck includes a single ESG sustainability slide with very generic claims. It's got 3 or 4 things with E, S, and G. It says we're probably responsible, but everybody claims to be responsible. Can you imagine a mining company saying we're going to be irresponsible? So they've all put we're responsible in. But what does that do? And I was in with a fund manager yesterday, and they said it's a complete irrelevant waste of a page. I think the key point is that every company claims to be responsible. Very few understand what that means, and even fewer can prove it. Trust is built through clarity, evidence, and proactive storytelling. Make it unique to your company and your project. Identify areas with which you are working on or have worked on, which give support, give justification for that. Has there been baselines done? Has there been feedback from community? Be transparent about it. Transparency allows for that engagement and that communication, that debate to happen. When the stakeholders largely distrust a sector, that lack of transparency clearly doesn't deliver what we effectively need. So I said I'd come back to what investors are looking for these days. And really, I think the important thing is they have moved on. As I say, they've got recollection of the past. And we're looking to find management teams that stand out, that have identified risk, mitigated that, and therefore are going to get a better execution in their program. So what are they looking for? Well, first of all, proof of what they're trying to demonstrate. Transparency allows for that. Governance, KPIs, you can have clear accountability of where things are going, and making sure that we're ready for effectively future standards that come in place. Better preparation. I mean, it shatters me that the number of companies that get through to project financing and are totally unprepared for something which has been in place for the last 25 or 30 years. The Equator Principles and IFC account for 75% of project finance. Yet very few companies are prepared to go down that route when it comes up to it. That is a significant area of improvement that we can do. We can be better prepared, we can reduce the timeline of that process and result in a better outcome. And I think the other thing is that fund managers aren't interested. And again, this came up with a company just 2 days ago where the board had said, well, why do we need to consider something when we've done 50 or 500 compliance documents? Well, the reality is that investors aren't going to look at 50 to 500 compliance documents. They're there as support for what they've effectively done. But what's really needed is to raise confidence, trust in a simple way with which we can effectively move from compliance to value. How can we get comfortable that this management team has identified its risks, reduced those risks, taken action, and communicate that in a simple and easy way? It's not just risk mitigation, but that in itself leads to a credibility multiplier. If you can present that in a single page with clear justification, then ultimately that comes across really strong, really powerful when you're engaged with your investors. We've recently just, Digbee, we've just come up with collaboration with Terra Capital in Sydney, a mining fund in Sydney. And in talking about embedding sustainability as part of their investment decision-making, Dylan Kelly highlighted the fact that they see their portfolio generally gaining in premium valuations because they are lower risk propositions that can raise capital at a lower cost. And to me, that really kind of brings in the importance and the capability with which we can effectively move this industry and therefore be better recognized with a better outcome. So I think really I just wanted to touch on better communication, which is clear, justified, credible, shows, particularly when we're touching on a lot of these different topics within sustainability, which do have a direct relation back to risk, shows that you're aware of that risk. You're actively managing it and mitigating it earlier in the process in order to be better prepared. It gives you the ability to go out and tackle permitting and engagement with your local community far stronger. And ultimately, it's a powerful signal to investors. It not only states that we're investor ready, but we're also ready to now go down this development pipeline. Responsible leaders, perhaps, is an overused term, but if they can do so with credible communication and clear communication, they attract high quality capital. Bear in mind that a lot of the capital on the market is very aware of the challenges of the industry over the last 20 or 30 years. So if they can attract higher quality capital, imagine getting a Fidelity or a BlackRock onto your share register, or the superannuation funds in Australia, or some of the Canadian pension funds. If we can begin to attract these companies on a longer term basis, it's stickier capital, and they'll be coming in to support management teams they believe that can execute on time and on budget. It's much more supportive, a lot less work if you can bring on longer term capital, patient capital to develop these mines. If they have the confidence and that you can keep on time and on budget and being part of the 17% club, then you stand out completely with regards to your share register, your premium valuation, how you move from the right-hand side of the bar chart of value back towards the left-hand side. This is not a new concept. There are plenty of companies out there, the Lundin family of companies, the Agnico Eagle, a number of juniors like Marimaca, which tends to raise capital at a lower cost typically. Foran, we've got a number of other companies where the communication has been very clear. The strategy has been very clear, and that is making a difference in a very crowded market. I just want to finish off this today with what you can do today. Treat sustainability like strategy. It's not compliance. Embed it within your decision-making as soon as possible. Listen to what others have done and emulate them. Agnico, Lundin, Foran, Marimaca have all built their business on the basis of sustainability, questioning at every stage, how would this impact that? Rather than just going down the same old pitch book of we'll do it this way, this way, this way, this way, without embedding this in and having that conversation at management level to mitigate risk. The core has got to be, how do I develop this asset without delays and cost overruns, which do afflict 83% of the industry? The second thing is I simply don't understand why we're afraid as an industry to put sustainability up front in the pitch deck, particularly when we're talking to investors who are looking at risk. I totally recognize the failure of the phrase ESG and the rubbish that came out of that. But go beyond that, because what comes out of this is risk mitigation. Put it up front in your pitch deck. Lead with confidence and conviction and proof of what you've done. Identify and be transparent with the areas of risk that you've done. Keep it simple, keep it short, keep it to 1 page or 2 pages, but be upfront with it. Investors value risk. And if you don't mention the roadmap of potential risks which affects every single mining company going through development and production, then how on earth are they going to know? Speak up about it, give them the confidence, and allow yourself to therefore prove to be credible with that. And the last thing is, Digbee created its frameworks in order to be able to accelerate this for companies that were not built on this strategy in the first place. In order for those companies to be able to demonstrate and prove that they are not only development stage ready, but also investor ready, and therefore to be able to gain credibility in as fast a time as possible. Please do reach out if we can help in any way, and I look forward to the next stage of our webinars, which will move on to interviews with a few people, older and younger, as we go forward on this journey. We've got money coming back into the industry. Let's now try and make sure that we're the companies that are premium rated. Many thanks.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you happen to be. And thanks for that. Thanks for joining us. Any questions, do please just pop them into the question thing. I think on my side, it's in the bottom right. So please do that. We've got a few questions which have come up. I'll take them pretty much as they are. The first one is, you've argued that responsible mining is the future. But how can we actually prove that companies embracing responsibility are being recognized differently by the market? And isn't this still more rhetoric than reality? Look, I think the first thing to say is this is early. I think it's really pleasing to see some differentiation beginning to happen. It's not happened necessarily in the same way that we anticipated through the marketplace initially. I think we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years the supply chain leading on this, where offtake agreements have been prioritized with regards to a responsible led mining, and so we know where the resource is coming from and everything. But this is now beginning to filter into, I think, stock market valuations. Not surprising, as liquidity comes back to the sector, new investors are coming back in, and those investors very much have publicly stated certain requirements with which they have. Second thing is on this topic is, of course, as was said in the presentation, is that responsibility is not just compliance. It's very much relates to risk, and therefore it relates to which companies are going to go through development and into production without blowing up the capital structure. So I recognize entirely that this is new. It's early, but there are very clear signs evolving. There's good examples out there as to premium valuations linked directly to this, such as companies I've mentioned, but Agnico Eagle is a great one, but it goes the whole way through the realm. I mean, look at only this week the Barrick and Newmont news, and really the lack of embracement of sustainability in a kind of public way through Barrick against the Newmont very clear definition of building up their asset base and their operations in the same way, and how that's resonated ultimately into valuations, expectations, social license to operate, and health and safety issues, which I think are very clear and statistically out there. So yes, this is definitely early. It's not universal yet, but the direction of travel is unmistakable. So happy to talk on any more of that if anybody wants to chime in. The next question is, every mining deck has a page that says we are responsible, but 90% have nothing credible behind it. What separates a box ticking ESG claim that really shifts investor confidence? I think I kind of largely addressed this, but I think if you know your audience, you know what they're trying to do. Ultimately, if we can raise confidence and trust. So if you're going to go into a presentation with investors and we're looking for money to develop an asset, then clearly we've got to look at all of the different steps of that risk matrix so that we can effectively manage our budgets and our time commitments. And so that's not just related to technicals. It's not just related to engineering or geology or metallurgy, which are of course critical and the basis of developing an asset, but how the interaction with local communities, regulators, how we address some of the other areas around it. Have we got a good, strong governance position so that effectively all of these issues then become part of the process where we can reduce that risk that companies go over budget. So I do recognize that sometimes it's difficult because we've been doing this for so many years and we never got any value out of sustainability historically. Now that this is beginning to come in and it's very much part of that matrix, which is valued. The last thing is most juniors only discover the true cost of IFC and equate to compliance when they're right in front of the banks, usually too late. What specific early actions separate the companies who glide through financing from those who stumble? Well, I think the first part of that question rather answers it. I think, when you come to development and you want to go through and get your capital from lenders or equity, I think the key point is if we're better prepared and we know where the risks are, we've identified risks with which we were able to address before we went into that, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years beforehand, then clearly we're going to have a more smoother operation. We're not going to get yellow flags, orange flags, or dare I say it, red flags coming up just when we don't want to. So those early actions are important. Get the baselines done early, identify any risks that might need to be addressed, and therefore go into that better prepared. But I think the second bit is communication. Is how do we effectively then be better prepared and then be able to put our front foot forward and have a strong, justified argument to say that we have mitigated these risks, and effectively coming out with an independent third-party assessment which dictates or highlights all of these different areas. That's transparent, it's accountable, and with clear forward-looking vision as to other areas with which they're going to be mitigated. That just builds confidence and trust. It puts that CFO in a role and in a position which can accelerate the process of that due diligence. So hopefully that's given you a bit of colour on these core areas, which I think really address some of the underlying challenges, but also the opportunities with which the sector has. If anybody wants to reach out and have any other questions privately or whatever, please do. Otherwise, we'll close it off here. I think I've answered the 3 questions. And many thanks indeed for joining, and have a good day wherever you happen to be. All the best.